What if the very thing you're chasing is running from you, not because God is cruel, but because you're not yet ready to hold it without breaking it? There's a woman right now scrolling through engagement announcements, feeling that familiar sting of being left behind, believing the lie that her waiting is wasted time. But what looks like divine delay might actually be divine protection, shielding her from a blessing she's not yet equipped to steward. We're Bible Voice, and we don't do surface-level encouragement here. We dig into the uncomfortable truths that actually set people free, the kind of wisdom that hurts before it heals. I want to introduce you to someone we'll call Amara. She's 32, works in healthcare, serves on the hospitality team at her church, and has spent the last 7 years convinced that God has forgotten her deepest prayer. She's watched younger women in her congregation get married, some to men who barely attend service. She's been a bridesmaid 9 times. 9. And each time she smiled through the reception, while her heart quietly shattered, wondering what disqualified her from the same joy. Amara wasn't asking for much, or so she thought. Just a God-fearing man who loved Jesus and wanted a family, seemed reasonable, seemed biblical. So why did every promising connection dissolve into disappointment? Why did the men who pursued her turn out to be emotionally unavailable or spiritually lukewarm? Why did God keep saying no when her request seemed so aligned with His design for relationship? The subtle shift from trust to control. Here's what nobody tells you about waiting for marriage. There's a razor-thin line between hopeful expectation and toxic desperation, and most of us cross it without even noticing. It happens gradually. You start checking your phone more frequently. You overanalyze every interaction with a potential romantic interest. You create elaborate scenarios in your mind about how God might orchestrate your meeting. You start attending different church services, hoping to expand your options. Amara reached a point where she couldn't attend a wedding without spending the entire ceremony doing mental calculations. She's 24, I'm 32. He proposed after 6 months, I've been waiting 6 years. They just met. I've been praying since college. The math never added up in her favor, and each equation reinforced the belief that she was somehow deficient. But here's where it gets spiritually dangerous. Amara started making small compromises she would have never considered before. When Marcus showed interest in her at a work conference, she ignored the fact that he openly mocked her faith during lunch conversations. He'll change, she told herself. Once he sees how happy we are together, he'll want what I have. 3 months of emotional whiplash later, when Marcus told her he'd never stop her from going to church, but he certainly wasn't joining her, she finally walked away. But the damage was done. She had already given pieces of her heart to someone who had no reverence for the God she served. Then came Adrian, who attended church but treated it like a social club. He knew all the right words, could quote scripture when it suited him, but his life bore no fruit of transformation. Amara knew this. She saw it clearly. But she was tired, and tired people make dangerous compromises. 6 weeks into dating Adrian, her best friend Kendra pulled her aside after service. "Amara, I need to say something, and you're probably going to hate me for it," Kendra started, choosing her words carefully. "Adrian is performing religion for you. That man doesn't love Jesus. He loves the idea of you, and he's willing to play the part temporarily to get what he wants." Amara's defense was immediate and sharp. "You don't know him like I do. You don't see how he treats me, how he talks about our future." "You're right," Kendra said quietly. "I don't see that. But I do see you shrinking yourself, excusing behavior you'd call out in anyone else's relationship, and calling it patience when it's actually fear. You're afraid that if you let this one go, there won't be another, and that fear is making you blind." The conversation ended badly. Amara left angry, convinced Kendra was jealous or judgmental. But that night, alone in her apartment, Kendra's words echoed louder than Amara wanted to admit. She pulled out her journal, something she hadn't touched in months, and wrote a single question. "God, Have I made marriage an idol? The answer that came wasn't audible, but it was unmistakable. A quiet conviction that settled in her chest like a stone. Yes, the foundation you're building matters more than the timeline you're demanding. Breaking up with Adrian was one of the hardest things Amara ever did. Not because she loved him deeply, but because it meant going back to square one. It meant more empty Saturday nights, more holidays as the single friend, more questions from family members about when she'd settle down. It meant facing the thing she had been running from, herself. Because here's the truth that will either free you or offend you. If you can't be content alone with God, you won't be content married to anyone. That restlessness, that sense of incompleteness, that need for external validation, it doesn't disappear when someone puts a ring on your finger. It just shifts. You start needing your spouse to affirm you constantly, to fill the God-shaped void you never let him fill. You turn a human being into your functional savior, and that's a weight no marriage can bear. God wasn't punishing Amara by making her wait. He was rescuing her from a future where she'd build an entire life on the cracked foundation of neediness disguised as love. After the breakup, Amara did something radical. She stopped dating completely, not out of bitterness, but out of intentionality. She told God, "I'm removing this from my hands entirely. I'm not going to manage this anymore. I'm not going to strategize or manipulate or force open doors. If you want me married, you're going to have to do it yourself, because I've proven I can't be trusted with this." That kind of surrender feels like death before it feels like freedom. How to discern without becoming judgmental. Now, here's where many women who've been hurt swing too far in the opposite direction. They become so cautious that they reject every possibility. They build their walls so high that no one can scale them. They develop checklists so specific that Jesus himself wouldn't qualify. And they call it wisdom. I've sat with women who've told me they're waiting for God's best, but what they're actually waiting for is perfection. They want a man who's already arrived spiritually, emotionally, financially. They want someone who requires nothing from them, who poses no risk, who comes with a guarantee. That's not discernment, that's control dressed in spiritual language. Real discernment asks different questions. Is this person pursuing God even when it's inconvenient? Do they take responsibility for their own spiritual growth? Or are they looking for someone to disciple them into maturity? Can they identify their own weaknesses, and are they humble enough to work on them? Do they have a community that knows them well and holds them accountable? But here's the mirror you need to hold up to yourself simultaneously. Are you requiring things from them that you haven't cultivated in yourself? Are you demanding emotional health while your own wounds are still running your life? Are you expecting them to have their finances together while you're drowning in debt from emotional spending? Discernment without self-awareness becomes Pharisaism. You strain out gnats while swallowing camels, rejecting someone for surface-level imperfections while ignoring the log in your own eye. Amara had to learn this the hard way. When she met Christopher at a community outreach event her church was hosting, her first instinct was to find something wrong with him. He was recently divorced, which immediately triggered her defenses. Red flag, right? Except when she actually asked him about it instead of making assumptions, she learned his ex-wife had left him for another man after he refused to abandon his faith. He'd gone through hell, spent 2 years in intensive Christian counseling, and had done the deep work of healing and forgiveness. The old Amara would have dismissed him instantly based on his past. The new Amara recognized a man who'd been broken and let God rebuild him into something stronger. That's the difference discernment makes. What God is actually teaching you in the wait. While Amara was busy relearning how to be whole, God was doing surgery on her heart that could only happen in solitude. He was exposing lies she'd believed since childhood, lies about her value, her purpose, her identity. Lies that said she was only as important as the man who chose her. She started meeting with an older woman from her church named Patricia, a widow who'd lost her husband after 40 years of marriage. Patricia told her something that fundamentally shifted her perspective. "Sweetheart," Patricia said over tea one Thursday afternoon, "I love my husband more than I can express. But you want to know the secret to why our marriage lasted 4 decades? I never needed him to be God for me. When he failed me, and he did fail me because he was human, I had somewhere else to take my broken heart. When disappointment came, and it did come, I had a foundation that didn't crack. Too many women today are marrying men they expect to complete them, and then they're shocked when those men prove to be just as broken and needy as they are." Amara absorbed those words like a sponge. She began to understand that this season of singleness wasn't about becoming perfect. It was about becoming rooted. It was about developing a relationship with God so deep that when storms came in marriage, and they would come, she wouldn't be shaken to her core. She learned how to sit in silence with God without needing distraction. She learned how to process her emotions in His presence instead of calling a man to fix them. She learned the difference between loneliness and aloneness. Loneliness is a state of the heart that believes it's disconnected from love. Aloneness is simply a state of physical circumstance that can actually be rich with God's presence. Months passed, then a year, then 2, and something miraculous happened. Amara stopped measuring her life by what was missing and started celebrating what was present. She took a ceramics class and discovered a talent she never knew she had. She started mentoring younger women at church, pouring into them the wisdom she'd paid dearly to learn. She traveled to places she'd always waited to visit with a future husband, realizing that her life didn't have to be on hold until someone joined it. She became full, not because she no longer wanted marriage, but because marriage was no longer the prerequisite for her joy. When God's timing meets your readiness, I'm not going to give you a fairy tale ending here because this isn't about that. Some of you reading this will get married, some of you won't. And your value, your purpose, your significance in God's kingdom has absolutely nothing to do with which category you fall into. But I will tell you this. When Amara finally met the man who would become her husband, she almost didn't recognize it as the answer to her prayers. Because she'd stopped praying desperate prayers, she'd started praying different ones. She prayed for God to keep her heart soft. She prayed for wisdom to recognize character over chemistry. She prayed for the courage to walk away from good if it wasn't God's best. His name was David, and he was the sound engineer at her church. They had worked on the same team for 8 months before they ever had a real conversation. When they finally did, it was about theology, about how they'd both been shaped by seasons of breaking, about how they both understood that marriage wasn't the destination, but another part of the journey. There was no dramatic chase, no love at first sight moment, just a slow, steady recognition that they were walking in the same direction, both in love with Jesus first, both committed to the hard work of building something that would last. When David asked Amara to dinner, he was direct. "I want to explore the possibility of something more with you," he said. "But I need you to know I'm not going to rush this. I've made that mistake before, and I won't do it again. I want to do this right, with counsel, with community, with God at the center." Amara smiled, feeling a peace she'd never experienced in any previous relationship. "That's exactly what I need to hear." The relationship that followed wasn't perfect, but it was healthy. When conflicts arose, they addressed them with honesty and humility. When old wounds tried to resurface, they had the tools to process them. When doubts crept in, they had a community around them speaking truth. 18 months later, when David proposed, Amara's yes came from a completely different place than it would have years earlier. She wasn't saying yes because she needed to be chosen. She was saying yes because she recognized in David a partner who would point her to Jesus when life got hard, who would challenge her to grow, who would build with her something that glorified God. The lesson you can't skip. If you're in a season of waiting right now and it feels unbearable, I need you to hear something. This season is not punishment. But it is preparation, and the preparation only works if you stop fighting it and start submitting to it. God is not withholding marriage from you because he's stingy. He's withholding it because he loves you too much to give you something you destroy or something that would destroy you. He's teaching you lessons that will determine whether your future marriage thrives or merely survives. He's showing you how to find your identity in him so you don't look for it in your spouse. He's healing wounds you didn't know you had so you don't bleed all over someone else. He's building character that can't be developed any other way. He's proving his faithfulness to you in the wait so you'll trust him in the trials of marriage. Every day you choose to trust him instead of taking control, you're building something that will matter for eternity. Every moment you worship him, despite the disappointment, you're developing a faith that won't crumble when life doesn't meet your expectations. Every time you surrender your timeline back to his hands, you're practicing a humility that will serve you in every relationship for the rest of your life. This wait isn't wasted. It's working something in you that you'll need desperately when the wait is over. So stop rushing, stop forcing, stop settling. Let God do what only he can do in this season. And trust that his timing is not a punishment, but a gift you'll spend the rest of your life grateful for. If this message met you where you are today, would you share it with someone else who's struggling in the wait? And I want to hear from you in the comments. What's one truth God has taught you in a season that felt like delay? Your testimony might be the exact encouragement someone else needs to keep trusting. Let's build each other up in this journey. God's got you, even when it doesn't feel like it.